Welcome to Joe's Recaps. In this video, we are going to comment a movie called Green Book. The movie is set in the year 1962. An Italian-American doorman, Tony, works at the Copacabana nightclub. He frequently comes across rude customers on his job, and sometimes he has to throw hands when they break the club's code. One night, a wealthy businessman visits their club and emphasizes that his hat must be kept safe. Because it was a gift from his mother, Tony steals the hat. That makes the businessman so angry. Later, he gives it back pretending to have gotten it from a thief. Because of the gesture, he gets money from the businessman and also befriends him. Tony and his friends are distressed because the club is being closed for renovation for 2 months. They have to look for a part-time job now.
For more videos like this, subscribe and click the notification bell.
The following day, 2 black men come to repair the kitchen sink at Tony's house. It is the 1960s. The African-American population in the U.S. is a frequent target of racism. Dolores doesn't care about their race and is very welcoming. She even offers them water and sees them off politely. But after they leave, Tony throws away the glasses they drank from. She doesn't think much of it because such racist behavior is common in society around the time. One day, while Tony is still looking for a job, he gets a call from a friend of his. He tells him about someone named Dr. Don Shirley who is looking for a driver. The next day, Tony goes to Don's place for an interview, and he finds out that he is an African-American man. He is a world-famous pianist and has a doctorate in psychology and music. Tony has never seen such a luxurious lifestyle in his entire life, and he is surprised that all belongs to Don. Don is planning to go on an 8-week concert tour through the Midwest and Deep South, and he needs Don to be his driver for the trip. If everything goes well, they will be able to return home on Christmas Eve. Don explains the job to Tony, but he doesn't want to be his butler alongside his driver. Don increases the pay because he knows he is going to face extreme racism in the way, and Tony seems like someone who can protect him, but Tony refuses and walks away. Later, Don calls Tony's house and asks Dolores for permission to take her husband away for 2 months. Tony agrees to accompany him for $125 a week. On the day of their departure, Dolores gives him farewell and urges him to write letters throughout the trip. The company rents them a nice car and tells Tony that if he misses a show, he will only get half of the money. More importantly, they give him a book called The Green Book. It is a tourist guide for black people in America that consists of a list of places for them to stay in. Tony is surprised that something like a book even exists. Then the journey starts, and initially, Tony bores Don with his non-stop chatter. Don is also annoyed because of Tony's improper grammar usage. His habit of eating messily with his hands and taking a leak in the middle of the road seems outrageous to him. On his first show, Don impresses everyone including Tony. Tony starts to respect him as a musician. As the journey continues, Tony plays contemporary music on the radio. He is shocked to find out that Don doesn't know popular musicians like Aretha Franklin. However, she is especially famous among the African-American community. He is even more surprised when Don reveals he has never had Kentucky Fried Chicken. They stop at the original restaurant in Kentucky, and Tony forces Don to try it. Although he is initially skeptical about eating with his hands, he is pleasantly surprised upon the dish. One day, they stopped at a gas station where Tony finds an expensive gemstone on the ground. It seems to have fallen off a cart of a rock seller. He pockets it, but he is immediately called out by Don. The pianist asks him to go inside and pay for the rock. Tony whines and groans, but he does it anyway. Then the duo reaches the second venue, but the piano for Don is not original and clean. The janitor tells that a black person like him would have no problem playing on such a piano. It makes Tony furious, and he punches the man in the face. The piano is then replaced with the original one for the performance. As they enter further south, Don is made to stay at blacks-only hotels. Even though he is among his people, he doesn't feel comfortable. One night, he goes to a bar. A bunch of racists beat him up just for being in there. Tony quickly comes to the location and threatens the thugs, claiming that he has a gun. After they narrowly escaped from there, Don asks him if he really has a gun. Tony tells that he was just bluffing, and they continue to the hotel. For the next show, they stop at a southern mansion. As usual, Don is the center of attraction in the room. He is used to such an environment. The host even makes special fried chicken for the main guest, but he is denied to use the white people's bathroom. The host directs him to a tiny wood cubicle outside the house. Refusing to be humiliated, Don returns to the hotel to go to the bathroom before going back to the show. Tony is furious at seeing Don being polite to the people who denies him basic decency. Throughout the journey, Tony writes letters to his wife, but they are mostly awful. Don reads them and sees several grammar mistakes. The pianist helps him make them more poetic and beautiful. Dolores gets the letter and cannot help but cry at the beauty of it. In the following scene, they spot a nice suit displayed in front of a store. Don walks in to buy it, but the owner doesn't let him try it on before paying. It is clear that the man is judging him on the basis of his skin color. Tony wants to retaliate, but Don stops him and politely leaves. The duo is outside a hotel when Tony runs into two of his Italian friends from New York. Seeing that he is working for an African American man, they ask him to have some dignity. They even offer a job with better pay. Later that day, Don offers Tony double the money and promotes him. He speaks Italian and reveals that he understood everything his friends talked about earlier. Tony tells that he was never planning to leave him in the middle of the trip and refuses to accept more money. Don is touched by his comment. On the way to their final show in Mississippi, they are pulled over by the local police. It turns out that in their part of the town, African American people are restricted from being out at night. The officer pulls them out of the car, and he calls Tony a racial slur for being an Italian. He loses his temper and punches the officer. Eventually, it leads them to be arrested. Don uses his rights to call someone. In a short time, the police receives an angry call from the governor. They eventually have to release them because of Don's influence. Outside, Don reveals that he called Attorney General Robert Kennedy. Tony is amazed and happy about it, but Don doesn't feel the same. He is furious at Tony because they will be late for the last show. He has been called names in his entire life, and he is mad that Tony couldn't even handle it once. The conversation turns into an argument. Tony calls Don a delusional rich man who doesn't know anything about the struggles his own people have to face. Don storms out of the car in frustration. In his entire life, he has been too black for white people, too white for black people. He expresses his frustration to Tony, who understands his problems and silently apologizes. That night, they stay at a hotel where Tony writes another letter to his wife. He tells that he has gotten a hang of it by now, but Don insists on reading it. In the letter, Tony has described his wife as a house full of a happy family. The pianist smiles and approves. A few hours later, they arrive at the final venue in Alabama. Don has been shown great respect when the host lets him park his car in the space of honor spot. But right after, he is taken to a tiny closet that is his dressing room. Don doesn't complain and continues changing inside it. He then tries to join the others in the dining room, but he is denied access. The host claims that they have nothing personal against him, but it has been a tradition for the restaurant to only allow black servants to walk inside the dining space. When Don refuses to play unless he is allowed to dine, the host tries bribing Tony to persuade his boss. Tony is about to get handsy with the man, but Don stops him, and they drive off to a bar for black people. Don flashes his wallet filled with money, and a couple of thugs notice. He plays the piano with the local jazz band and enjoys his time. When they are about to leave, Tony spots the thugs from earlier waiting behind their car to mug them. He uses his gun to fire 2 shots into the air and scare them away. From behind him, a shocked Don swears that he knew Tony had a gun all along. Then they begin their journey back to New York, hoping to make it by Christmas Eve. They drive through a snowstorm that makes the journey even more difficult. Don jokingly asks Tony to bring his lucky stone out. Tony shamelessly puts the stone on the dashboard, and the two laugh about it. After hours of driving non-stop, Tony can no longer stay awake. He gives up on reaching home on Christmas Eve, but Don offers to drive while he rests behind the car. They make it to Tony's apartment right before the family dinner. Tony invites Don in, but he wishes him Merry Christmas and drives away. Dolores and the family are pleasantly surprised to have him back. As they talk about the trip, Tony's brother jokingly calls Don a slur, but Tony asks him to be more respectful. A while later, a knock on the door reveals that Don has returned to join them. The entire family welcomes him wholeheartedly. Dolores hugs him and thanks him for helping Tony with his letters. After all, they remained friends for the rest of their lives before they both passed away in 2013. For more videos like this, subscribe and click the notification bell. And don't forget to hit the like button. Also, you can check our other videos. Enjoy and take care.